I just got done watching Ethan Cohen's brand new film, Honey Don't, and right off the bat, I can tell you that this is a movie that I did not care for. So, giving some background context, I saw this movie on a whim. I had seen a small snippet of the trailer, only enough to see who was in the movie, but I had no clue what the movie was actually going to be about when I walked in. Unfortunately, I think my lack of what I was getting myself into didn't prepare me for what I was given. This movie ended up being a jumbled mess of scenes put together in a way that barely resembles a plot. My biggest gripe with this movie overall is that it has no identity. It doesn't know what it wants to be or what it's trying to be, and as a result, it fails at what it is. Okay, so jumping right into it, let's start from the beginning. I'll try to be as spoiler free as possible in case you were planning on seeing it. Okay, so from the opening scene, we're seemingly presented with the death of a person, which serves as the catalyst of the events that follow. Shortly after, we're presented with Margaret Qualley's Honey, who plays a private investigator unofficially charged with solving the murder. It really pains me to say this, but Margaret brings a very bland and emotionless take to the character that left me wondering what's going on in her head. She's unnecessarily cryptic, strangely horny, and overall just not effective in selling her character. This was strange to me because I'm actually a really big fan of her work. I thought she was great in The Leftovers, The Substance, and even Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now, I can't blame her for my overall opinion of the film because at the end of the day, it's the director's job to craft a compelling narrative, and unfortunately, that just wasn't here. The director attempts to make the world feel lived in by giving the character some off-screen history, but it's never conveyed how long everyone has known each other and what experiences they've gone through. Okay, so let's start talking about some other characters in the film. So some other characters include Chris Evans, who was really the only positive note that I have on the film. I feel like he did a really great job of playing the religious scumbag who's really in it for the girls and the money. While watching the movie, I could tell that he was the only one actually having fun with his role. Every time he was on screen, I was wondering what obnoxious thing he was going to do next, and when he wasn't, I was just counting down the time to when we could see him again. Aubrey Plaza is also in the movie, and again, this is another case of a character who usually has a lot of presence and commands the scene, who ends up being forgetful. She's in the movie maybe a total of 6 to 8 minutes, and doesn't really get anything to do until the last 10 minutes of the film. I feel like if you're going to cast these A-list actors, then you want to utilize them well, and not make it so their roles can be played by literally anyone. Seriously, it feels like anyone could have played the lead, and this movie would have been no different. Charlie Day is in the film pretty much as I am. He has maybe 2 minutes of screen time, and again, he could have been played by anyone. This movie could have been better if they cast some up and coming actors who may not be as familiar to everyone. That would give them a great chance to explore character development and establish presence, but that's not what we got. Instead, we got to see a bunch of familiar faces who seemed to only be in it for the paycheck. If you ever get the chance to watch this film, I strongly suggest you pay real close attention to the performances and see for yourself how lackluster they are. Okay, so now let's shift over to talking about the structure of the movie. So speaking in terms of camera work, I was left disappointed because the movie is not visually impressive. If you guys saw my weapons review, I talked about how great the editing and the camera movement was, and this film is a complete 180. The film incorporates a lot of still camera movement, where the camera pans from right to left or is used as a shot reaction shot. Essentially, what I mean is that the camera doesn't really move a lot. It'll cut between two people talking, but doesn't try to push the cinematography in any exciting way. I love it when the camera feels like a character, and this movie just doesn't have that. This is incredibly strange because this movie was directed by Ethan Cohen, one of the visionaries behind No Country for Old Men, Fargo, and The Big Lebowski. He also directed last year's Drive Away Doll starring Margaret Qualley. I didn't get the chance to see that, but let me know if you want me to, and I'll try to compare these two films together. Moving on further, I want to highlight how this movie doesn't effectively use the promise and deliver technique. So going back to that opening scene that I had mentioned earlier, the movie sets up some information that never fully pays off. We're meant to learn that certain characters are shady, and things will lead back to them, but they inevitably don't. The characters themselves already showcase how they're bad, so it felt like the opening scene was only there to introduce the other characters and nothing else. And I apologize by being super vague by saying some characters and so forth, but I'm trying to be as spoiler free as possible. And yeah, this movie suffers from a huge identity crisis, with quite a few subplots that ultimately lead nowhere, and so I question why they were even included at all. One moment it's a noir, the other it's a very violent and gory mess, and then it'll jump to two characters getting busy, all within the span of 10 to 15 minutes. This film doesn't know what it wants to be. Oh, and going back to character design, they made Margaret Qualley's character gay, and they try to treat her sexuality like a joke. She's constantly being hit on by men who won't accept her for who she is, and the only way we're reminded of her sexuality is when her character hooks up with a random person. I can only assume that her character was made gay as a way to advance the plot of the story, and that seems like a slap in the face because it serves no other purpose. Now, jumping back to the structure of the story, I can also say that it also doesn't convey passage of time in an effective way. I cannot tell you how long this story takes place. It's definitely a glimpse in the life, but I can't tell if it unfolds over 2 days or 2 weeks, and I think that could have gone a long way to helping the story better. Also, the story just has a strange atmosphere in general. And what I mean by that is that it clearly takes place in modern day, and I know that because they reference real world events like COVID and then they have modern day iPhones, but the movie is presented as if it takes place in the late 80s and early 90s. This further suggests that the film suffers from an identity crisis. Overall, while it might sound like I hated this movie, I didn't. I was just left confused on who this movie was even made for. I couldn't accurately pinpoint a theme and couldn't decide what the overall takeaway from this film was supposed to be. Now I know that not every movie has to have this grand message, but what this movie did leave me with was nothing. Unfortunately, this movie was underwhelming and suffers from some pretty big narrative and structural issues. Also, I'm not sure why this movie is called Honey Don't. No one ever says it in the film, and Honey is not an impulsive character, so that was confusing to me as well. All in all, I can only recommend checking it out if you're a fan of Ethan Coen's work or if you're a cinephile like myself. For everyone else, I'm not sure if you'll enjoy it. Thankfully enough, the movie is just under an hour and a half, and it does go by pretty fast, so that's another thing I could say in benefit of the movie. But other than that, this movie really let me down. But those are just some of my thoughts. And with that, that brings us to the end of the video. Let me know if you guys have seen it, and what do you think? Maybe I missed something. Be sure to let me know in the comments of your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in my next video coming soon. Thanks for watching.